Hey there, everyone. My name is Megan Towns. I work for Microsoft on the education team here in Australia as a modern workplace specialist. So basically, I work with our schools to enable them to enable the technology to serve their teachers and students. I'll also be joined very soon by Andrew Cornwall and Burg from St Bede's Catholic College. But for now, I just want to talk a little bit about modern school device management and the fact that we are living in a world where technology needs are evolving, and we need to acknowledge that there have been old ways of working, and they're perhaps no longer efficient, and we need to move into more modern ways of managing our IT. So we're often dictated to by legacy applications and manual processes and people accessing a single device on a desk. The world has very much changed. We've moved from those single devices to people accessing devices both in the school environment but also at home, especially due to remote learning. The devices are not necessarily owned by the school anymore. Sometimes our students and our staff are accessing devices that they themselves own, but that we still want to be secure. Likewise, we've moved into a whole range of different software services. Our processes are going from manual to automated, and we're looking now at more proactive approaches and self-service approaches to managing our devices. Because when it comes to our endpoints, our devices that are in people's hands, it can get quite messy. But we want to ensure that the existing investments are looked after. We want to ensure that the devices that are in people's hands are secure and also mobile where possible. So at Microsoft, we have a solution previously called Intune, but now called EndPoint Manager. And it's basically a platform that unifies and secures the endpoint management of all those devices. So it's cloud-driven. We have consoles, both Configuration Manager and Microsoft Intune, that work together with some other technologies to create this endpoint manager experience. So when we look at the life cycle of using Endpoint Manager, it becomes a process of enrolling devices. We can do that in a number of different ways, whether it be bulk enrollment or self-service. We can also look at Windows Autopilot for new devices, and even look at the Apple devices as well to enroll. So then around provisioning them and setting up the applications and the settings that you would like on those devices. Doesn't have to be for the whole school. They can be set up in different groups. So you might have a different set of applications and settings for your infant students compared to your primary or secondary students. Likewise, your staff might have a different set of devices. For example, creative and performing arts staff might need to have a completely different set of applications compared to humanities, for example. You can very much customize that through the Endpoint Manager experience. Then it's about managing it. I know, having worked in a school before, teachers discover that there's a new bit of software out there and they'd like to get that on their students' devices. That could be a quite long process in the past. Now, you're able to do that on the fly and distribute that software really easily in a no-touch way. And then finally, as the process of as the cycle of your devices comes to an end, there needs to be a process around retiring those devices and resetting or deleting the device. So the process can continue into the next round of managing technology. That is what the life cycle looks like for Endpoint. I will close things up with some screenshots and what that all looks like from a management end. But for now, I'm super excited to chat to a couple of people who have done this in the real world at their school. Okay, so I've got the amazing Andrew and Ray here from St Bede's Catholic College. I'll let the two of you do your own introductions. Over to you first, Andrew.
Hi, I'm Andrew Cornwall. I'm a leader of learning at St Bede's Catholic College. I look after HSIE and I also look after technology at the school. I've been a part of the school's journey since before its foundation, when I was in at the office as an education officer in the area of technology. When they built a school in my backyard, I jumped ship and went into went back to school at St Bede's and started there as a leader of learning for its foundation.
Awesome. And your fabulous colleague, Ray?
Yeah, hi, I'm Ray Burg. I am the support officer for St Bede's. I've been there since day one. I think Andrew was actually on the interview committee. Thank you very much, Andrew, for appointing me a position there. I originally was from the University of Newcastle. I worked there as an IT manager for many, many years, and I like not to say how many years so people can't tell how old I am. But after that, I ran my own business for about 10 years. I'd done such a good job of running my own business, I wouldn't see my customers again for another 10 years, which is why I decided to go back to full-time work again. Plus, my kids go to the primary school right beside where I work at St Bede's, so it's a handy thing watching them grow and learn.
Amazing. I love it. And so super keen to hear from you both, especially you, Ray, around the journey that St Bede's has been on with devices. So, what did your device deployment look like at that foundation time when the school first began?
It was pretty crazy the first time. We had about 120 students, and thanks to Andrew's fantastic work, he already decided and convinced a lot of the people who are in the correct positions that we should be a BYOSD. So we had the specified devices. He'd done all the work of going around and negotiating the best channel partner to deal with for the parents to buy the devices. So virtually when I turned up, he said, Ray, guess what? You've got 120 devices and you've got about a week to set them all up and put them in the students' hands. So after he picked me up from the floor, I sat down there and tried to work out the best way to do it. And me being an IT manager for such a long time was trying to think of bigger picture ways of doing it, and nothing was really available at the moment. I was running out of time. So that first probably deployment was a bit of a mess where I was just sitting down with 120 boxes full of computers. I was unpacking them about 10 at a time, setting them up in the middle of the staff room with all the teachers around me. Luckily, there was a spare meeting table in the middle, which was quite large. I had a large switch there, which the computers are all plugged into with power. I'd turn them on, doing the same thing 120 times of logging in with the students' details, setting it up as a brand new device, then going through and installing manually all the bits and pieces of software, Microsoft Office, putting in all their email settings, putting in all their OneDrive settings and their OneNote settings, and putting in certificates so they can access the network. So just imagine how long that would take. Time 120. Especially for the first few, I made a couple of mistakes because I'm thinking, hey, we've got a standard image here. Let's try using that, until I found out later on that standard images are for corporately owned computers only and not for personal student ones. I went, oopsie, so I had to redo 5 of them. So that was a nice little learning. And then when Andrew sort of said, well, you've got to do all that again every year from now on, I'm thinking, there's got to be a better way. So I looked around, tried lots and lots of different software, different approaches. I initially tried one called Total Software Deployment. It was quite nice and very cheap, and it's the only thing that I could get my hands on at the time. And for the first couple of years, it worked pretty well, where I'd load up the standard pool of software that had to go on all the devices. I still had to unpack the devices, set them all up by hand, put the students' details in, set a remote client or an agent up on each of the devices, and once that was done, I could deploy software to it. Then come the last year, then Andrew said, well, you got to do all that again, but now we're getting 180 devices per year for year 7, plus you got to do year 10. I'm thinking, wow, this is quite a lot. And plus a lot of things in the background were happening where we're looking at different vendors and different channel partners and different suppliers, a lot of committee meetings, which we'll discuss later on how that all worked out. But we changed from Dell to Lenovo. And Lenovo sort of said, hey, we've got a really great tool. We'll give it to you for free because you could be the first people in Australia to use it. And it was called FileWave. And I thought, this looks really nice. It's going to be a great bit of software. And I said to the people at Power, at the CSO, I said, we've been offered this new free tool, and it's supposed to be quite good. And they went, oh, we've got a better one called Intune. And I said, but I can't get access to it. And he said, well, if you dump FileWave and go to Intune, we'll give you access to it. And I went, done, it's a good deal. So we some testing in the background, and I'd done some deployments to a few random devices that Lenovo set up for some demo machines, and I was blown away of how simple it was. It was so easy that all you had to do was to get to the first screen where the student had to pick whether it's going to be a personal computer or a corporate connected computer. And as soon as they done that, the rest of that was virtually automatically done. You just signed in with your standard student email account, and then everything else was automatically deployed. All the software that needed to be put on was automatically deployed. All the certificates was automatically deployed. The best thing was Adobe Creative Suite was automatically put on, which is a bugbear for me. That is so hard to get automatically deployed through any software. It always falls over. All their all their notes and all their OneDrive was automatically set up and linked up. I didn't have to do anything virtually. All I had to do was hand them the computer at the end, and it was so simple to do. I set up, I think it was 7 classes about a year ago for the year 9s going into year 10. I ran the first 3 classes just with an overhead projector. Oh, not an overhead, but a screen that just a Vivi screen that we use, putting up PowerPoint slides. And I was able to just show a few different steps of how the student can self-enroll their computer and install the software. And I had a few of our IT gurus in there from the year 9 classes. And it was so simple. I said to them after the 3rd one, you can run this yourself, couldn't you? And they went, yeah. So I just sat down the back of the room for a couple of the classes, watching them actually teach the other students how to do it. And I think in the last class, we didn't even bother turning up. We just went to the end of the class and we had to go. And the guy said, too easy. It's not a problem at all. So it was quite a big success for me, pretty well panicking at the start of every year, trying to do all this work, which would take me days, probably weeks, to set up 120 computers, to now I virtually just give the student a computer that's still in the box. Here's a few instructions, sign on, and off you go, and it just automatically happens.
And that's amazing. It absolutely saving you so much time, just so much time at the beginning of the year. I guess, Andrew, from a teaching and learning perspective, does it make it easier when there's a need for, I guess, more software to be deployed when things need to change, as often happens in education?
Absolutely. And if I sort of echo Ray's perspective, there's a point where Ray sort of hands things over to me, and I started an orientation program with our year 7 students. And if I think back to that first year of operation when we first started, that took almost a week to get them to sort of minimum viable operating status, sort of be able to hit the Wi-Fi, be able to access email, those kinds of things. By the second year, we sort of got it down to about 3 hours. But we're now at the point where this year with year 7, during that orientation program, I actually had to build in a sort of a bit of time where we went over a time filler. It was about the safety requirements around using the devices that are in their diaries that we read through with them, purely because I needed time for the software to download in the background when I was doing them in groups of 60. And so I had to fill in this time. It was such a quick process. So to go from that sort of week-long, drawn-out first year process to effectively within an hour or so having my year 7s good to go for learning was such a phenomenal difference for teaching and learning. And that for our school perspective, that meant this year in particular, our students were ready for learning by day 2 of school. So they came on their first day. We pointed out where the toilets were. We showed them where the classrooms were, gave them their device, got them all set up, and they came in the next day and they were ready to learn. And that was awesome. It meant we could get involved straight away in doing things like their best start assessment and getting that done. We did that day 2 with our year 7 students, and so we had data on them. And for a new school who draws in students from a range of backgrounds, getting that early data was really, really important to understanding who they were as learners. And I think that's the key point about our journey so far. We've sort of simplified what we can simplify, got to a point where all that kind of technical stuff of setting up or getting devices ready or deploying or that's been removed. It's been pushed out of the way, and it's given more time to focus on that teaching and learning. And for me, I think the biggest example of that in terms of deployment was during that remote learning space, where I know many schools had to get their staff and their students ready for remote learning. We didn't, and there was lots of reasons for that, but part of it was this ease of orientation that our year 7 students, by the time remote learning occurred, were already really established as learners using this kind of technology, because we had such a simplified orientation program. They were onboarded so quickly that come, I think it was week 8 of term 1, they were just ready to go to learn in an online space. So I think it's been really exciting. And the fact that, as Ray said, we were able to this year basically onboard 300 student devices in a very short window between the year 7, 180 year 7, 120 year 10 was such a success. And I love the fact that, as Ray said, we were able to almost step back from that.
No touch deployment,
yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah, and empowering the students to take ownership of that process too. I think, we've always been very focused at our school about student agency and them having involvement, and whether it be our device selection process, we involve student stakeholders in that process, through to that deployment process. We don't need to be the experts all the time. We've got these wonderful leaders in our school community, and they're not all those stereotypical geeky kind of leaders. They're a range of characters, but they bring with them an enthusiasm for learning with technology, and they have made our job so much easier, to the point, as Ray said, we're almost redundant in the process now, which is awesome. That's exactly what, as teachers, we want to be, is a little bit redundant.
And has it, not totally, just a little bit. And has it freed up that time as well that students might come to IT for help? Has it made just the operation of the device better as well? And probably a Ray question.
I'll answer my component, and then I'm sure Ray can jump in on that. I think there's a couple of things at play there, Megan. One of the things is that having a standardized device that's set up the same way means a lot of those common troubleshooting issues can occur at the classroom level, which is great. We've always had a sort of Ask 3 before me. I know a lot of schools will be familiar with that process, but the fact that all the student devices are the same and they're all set up the same, and EndPoint Manager has allowed them to be set up pretty hands-free, has meant that we don't actually see a lot of that low-level tech stuff. Add in Teams as well, where a lot of the students are kind of chat to each other and post questions on. We actually have a dedicated technology channel for each of our year groups, where our leaders self-help there. That I love jumping onto Teams and finding questions already been answered by another student before I even have to get there. That's crowdsourcing solutions is exactly what we want to see in our tech world. But that's my experience as a classroom teacher, that generally speaking, I don't see a lot of that low-level tech stuff, of the how do I do stuff. What about you, Ray, in terms of the more technical and hardware side?
I could see there's a huge decrease in demand, which is great news. I think it's to do a lot, especially with the Year 7 and Year 10 devices. I very rarely see them, probably because all the core fundamental issues that is maintained by Microsoft Enterprise Manager itself. So integrating with the LDAP side of things, that used to be a big issue before, where students couldn't log onto the Wi-Fi because it wasn't authenticating and things like that. Well, that's all handled now. It's just pushed out automatically. So if there's a certificate update, it's automatically pushed out. We don't have to worry about kids going through and trying to put Z-scale certificates back on and things like that. I very rarely see, I don't think I actually have seen any of them come through to say there's Wi-Fi or account issues or problems with their OneDrive or any issues with OneNotes or Teams. They seem to be pretty straightforward. I don't know, I have heard there's a self-healing functionality in that, so I think that could be part to do with it. I have had one issue where one of the Year 7 students just accidentally broke open a bottle of water in their bag and completely doused their computer. Had to pretty well change all the components internally, and that was all covered under our accidental damage claim. But the best part about it was that the technician handed it back to me. I knew who the student was, and I sort of knew his password because I set him up. I just logged in to it, and within probably about 15, 20 minutes, I was ready to hand it back from a whole, everything was back on there, all the software was back on there, all these data was accessible via OneDrive, and I never heard back from the student. Normally, those sort of things you'd hear back and go, such and such, I don't have access to something, or I missed a piece of software that they had, which I forgot about because it's unique to that year only, where I don't have to worry about that anymore. It's so simple. I think these modern devices now, as their deployment is probably 1 or 2% of my time, and the rest of it's on the other devices that were all manually installed or use that other software that I previously used. They're the ones that probably the bugbear, and that's where all my time is spent. I'd much rather looking at trying to move the school forward and better technology and better ways to deploy it and help Andrew out and those sort of technologies, and worry about fixing silly little things all the time. And that's what I don't have to worry about now, which is great.
Yeah, I guess that was sort of my next question. Would you either do anything different, or do you plan on doing more, I guess, in any other in your future rollouts?
The only thing I'm going to do...
Like, it's so simple that it works. Let's just stick with it.
Well, probably the process that we're doing and the handing out now. So instead of me, because at the moment now I still go in on the holidays over the Christmas period for the Year 7 devices, and I enroll them myself. But with the new technology, and it's been tested so well, that what I'll do is I'll just set up a one-pager for the students. So when they come in on the second last week of the holidays, I think, to pick up their uniform, we'll also give them a package of a new device. It'll probably have a customised skin on it. It'll also have an asset tag already on it, which is all pre-boxed by our channel provider. And the student should be able to take it home, sign in just using their school username, login, and password, and it'll just self-deploy. The good benefit is it'll load up their network more than our network, so we won't have that problem of Andrew of having to waste 45 minutes while the software is being loaded. So we may even be able to skip an extra day, so that day one...
You'll have day one start rather than day two start.
We're looking at now, so hopefully have a day one start. After that, I don't think we can improve much more, because it's getting to a point where the only thing we're probably looking at is... because we're the first school in the Maitland Newcastle area to do this, it's still a bit of a process of putting the software up on the system, but it'll get to a point where all the software you'll ever need is always available, and me being the administrator just for our school and saying our wishes next door, I can then just cherry pick what software is required for what year or what study groups for different electives, and then I could just have it as either optional or standard installs, and away you go. That's probably the next step.
Not every student really needs that full Adobe stack, so being able to target it to those groups that need it and those that don't, I think, is another powerful step.
If I touch on that point, Ray, I think it's, like if we reflect back just a little while ago when, we were, staff would have come to us, Megan, and say, I'd like this piece of software for the students, and we have to sort of brainstorm how do we get this deployed out in a largely BYO space, and that could be as low tech as USB drives go around to install stuff, because our school network was still growing with us, to where we are now, where if a piece of software is required for those devices that are enrolled in EndPoint Manager, it's as simple as sort of mentioning that to Ray, and that can be added to our software catalog and deployed to devices. So we've become a bit more agile in the way we can deliver software, and that's made it less stressful. I can remember in the first, at the end of the first year, we put a survey out to all the teachers going, is there any software you need for next year? Please let us know now, because we don't want to have to go through something.
I remember those days when I worked in schools. We'd have the SOE meeting in September. It would go on for a day and a half.
And that's the problem, isn't it? Is that you've got to try and guess what the year ahead looks like, and as a new school, we had
what software will be released, what's going to be the latest and greatest.
So this has made it a lot more agile, and we can be just in time with our software rather than just in case, which is kind of where we want to be with our technology.
An example was not long ago where someone come to me, one of the science teachers, so you can narrow it down a bit, said, I'd like to have this software put on all the whatever it was. It might have been the Year 10 devices, I think. It could have been the Year 7. And I said, yep, not a problem. When do you need it by? She said, next week. And I went, okay. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, I hope the CSO can get this done in time, or our main department who looks after all this software. So I put the request in, and it took them half a day, if that. And they just pretty well said, so which devices? I said, these devices. And I think within that afternoon or the next morning, they're already rolled out. So that's how quick it is. It's just virtually instant.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I love your story. It definitely tells the simplicity of modern device management. So thank you very much for sharing. Apologies, Ray, your internet wasn't that great with your kids all in the house, but I
could have probably done this at a different time. I forgot about Fortnite and the demands it has on the internet.
The challenges.
3 or 4. I don't know who's playing at the moment. Quite a few of them.
All good, all good. All right, well, gentlemen, thank you very, very much. Yes, it's not a live audience, but I'm sure there's a smattering of applause happening out there in EduTech land. So thanks, everyone, and we will wrap up things now.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
So I know it was really good to hear from Andrew and Ray. You're probably wanting to know a little bit more about it, perhaps. So when it comes to enrolling your devices, you've got some options, and you should check what restrictions you might have depending on what has been enabled in your environment. But basically, you're looking at end user enrollment, where they're the ones on their one-to-one devices, either school-owned or BYOD, who are enrolling the device at the point of unboxing. Then you also have the bulk enrollment on shared devices that are school-owned and providing a provisioning package or the autopilot self-deploying mode. Different schools will fall under different categories and potentially a combination of categories depending on what sort of school-managed device environment you have, potentially combined with a BYOD environment or a pure BYOD environment for your students. So it is important to consider what your enrollment options are. And then when it comes to moving from an on-prem solution to the cloud, there are different approaches that you can take, and it's not about choosing one or the other. It is about knowing what is available for you to move from, older methods of device deployment to modern methods of device deployment. They're sort of the options on screen. Sorry, lost my words there. As you move from on-prem to the cloud. Now, that's not going to happen immediately. You're not suddenly going to stop the way you've done things the whole time and then just suddenly move to our modern deployment methods. So there is a journey that you go on. And I have borrowed this journey from my colleague, Scott Breen. You can check out his LinkedIn account there. And looking at, how you can move to a modern management environment through a journey. And this is an example. If we look down the bottom there, you've got on-prem tech that you might want to retire over time. You've got the domain join technologies as well. Again, retiring those over time. And then as you adopt cloud tech and Azure AD join technology, they increase over time. So in the end, you end up moving to the modern deployment approach. So if we look at that as a specific journey around preparing your devices, adopting and then transitioning, it's about, enrolling those existing devices with hybrid Azure AD join when the enrollment is triggered by, group policy, configuration manager, co-management, and then moving into, configuring the delivery for optimization and configuring things like Windows Hello for business. Really great way for your little ones, especially, to be signing in. And then once, under adoption, looking at using the Intune app for deployment, which if I can use, anyone can use. And then looking at the Windows updates and how regularly they will roll out. And then looking to deploy those devices with autopilot and Azure AD join. And all the while, obviously at the bottom there, testing and preparing that configuration. So it's, a bit of a quick run through for what that journey might look like. It's the journey that some Bedes took. And for them, it just made life a lot easier. So that's an overview of what your journey might look like to modern deployment for your devices. We have a number of resources out there that you can check out to upskill yourself. I'll leave those on screen for just a minute. But, we have obviously the EndPoint Manager website, but then there's another number of resources you might check out just for how-to and information and research around these processes. And then there's always the YouTube videos as well. And then last screen, the other one you might want to check out is in Microsoft Learn, where you can go for all of our fundamentals training and certifications if you choose to sit the certification, which is paid. We have a standalone Microsoft EndPoint Manager fundamental course. So even if you don't sit the certification, you can still access the curriculum for free. So that might be something else you check out as well. So that is a brief explanation of EndPoint Manager for device management. And big thanks to Andrew and Ray for sharing their story of managing devices in a modern educational environment.